Hello, hello, everybody. I'm gonna try to get us a little. Josh is an interesting fella, so fortunately he's here another hour. So that was he really had him hooked. And I got to spend an hour with Josh a couple days ago, and I'm still thinking about it. So
yeah, and you still came back.
I came back. Here I am.
I was a little surprised.
I drank enough that I forgot most of it, so here I am. My name is Greg Hahn. I helped start this little tech wing of Treefort 10 years ago, and it's just been a delight to watch it turn into what Mike and his team have created. So I'm really happy to see you all here. I was never a tech guy, but I could tolerate them, so I think that's why I was nominated for this.
Hey, can we get a round of applause for Mike and his team?
Yeah, for sure. Big round of applause. What a great event. Hopefully you've had time to hang out in the big room and play with everything, and catch a bunch of talks. Today, this time around, we're looking ahead into the future. I'm going to introduce you guys. I want you to think about my first question, which is going to be, right now, what is technology doing to us right now that you thought was going to happen, and what is something technology is doing to us right now that you did not? And doing to us is a very broad term. Is it changing how you work, how you interact, something you saw coming and something you didn't see coming? You guys think about that while I introduce you. All right. So starting over there at the far left is Josh Johnston. A lot of you just saw him, and you know this. He builds new products with AI at Equifax, led a big the artificial intelligence transformation account, which then sold for an ungodly amount of money. He has run research teams fighting credit card fraud, building autonomous robots, has worked on self-driving cars, autonomy for bomb disposal robots, not bomb disposable robots, so I suppose they're disposable. Unmanned anti-submarine warfare vessels and much more. Went to Duke and Carnegie Mellon. Go Pittsburgh. Where's our Pittsburgh? Yeah, Pittsburgh. All right. Peter Bordow there in the middle is the managing director, distinguished engineer, which is a great title, and chief architect for PQC. I'm just going to read all this. PQC/Quantum Systems and Emerging Technology for Cybersecurity at Wells Fargo. And that just means a lot of big thinking, leading research and development, strategy, ideation across a portfolio that includes everything from digital identity, extended reality, privacy enhancing techniques, and more. He has done just about everything: digital circuit design, radar, laser, weapon systems, networking, storage and databases, security and applications. He's authored some papers I'm not even going to bother reading. If you want to read about those papers, go onto your app. Don't read mine. He lives in Arizona. Oh, and is a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo. So, and is a musician, and a passionate obstacle course race enthusiast. I don't even know what that was. I'll look it up. Raymond Kramer here next to me he was here for our second Hackfort years ago, just reminded me it was a really great moment of collaboration. We love these things where musicians and technology folks work together. There was a great young band at the time, and they're playing, I think, Street Fever's here this year too. She was a Boise State graduate and just really, one of these kids who's sort of like classically trained musician and then gets into this sort of intense, I don't know, how would you describe it, kind of metal EDM or something. And they designed masks for them with their 3D printer technology. I still remember it pretty clearly. And let's see, he works with organizations and communities to make meaningful results in everything: virtual reality, augmented reality, other upcoming technologies. XR, I believe, is the overarching term for that. And so we've got a pretty amazing group of folks who I think are good to answer this question. And since Josh just finished talking, we might start down here. So let's go to that first question. What is, today? So we're going to establish some foreseeing credentials here. What did you see coming about what's happening today? And then be honest, what didn't you see coming?
I saw the metaverse, as we know. It was a hype coming much faster, but it didn't come. Now I see it slowly coming back, and that is because of products like the Apple Vision Pro. It regenerates interest in that. So that's great to see. And Crypto, of course. That was something that I'm also involved with the metaverse and all these things. I thought that would be more common good nowadays as well. And of course, it's bumping back up. So that's the two areas that just come to mind.
Oh, great.
I'm still blown away by their bios. So.
Right. No kidding. Yeah, Raymond.
Yeah, great question.
Peter, sorry.
Yeah, you can call me whatever you want.
That's all right. I'll figure it out by the end.
I'm so good I can't work my. There we go. Hello, testing. Yeah, great question. I would say that one of the things that I knew was going to come was the extreme dependence upon technology, right? More and more the human race is depending on it for more and more things, right? And that's actually even scarier than you can express. Some of the things that I did not see coming was how technology in some ways is dividing us. Like we now have a global instantaneous communication platform all over the place, right? And you would think, we all thought 25 years ago that something like that would bring the whole world together in unity and vision and goals and all of this stuff. But really, at least from my observations, it's tending to do quite the opposite, right? It divides us into camps, into tribes, all with increasingly less tolerance for each other. So that was surprising and disappointing.
Interesting. Josh.
Yeah, so what I definitely did see coming is the difficulty in rollout of self-driving cars. Why I got out of that space, although probably a few years before I should have, because I would have liked to have gotten some of that ungodly money in that space. But it's a good example, I think, that we need to think about because people think that that's been a technology problem, and it's not. It's a business problem. So self-driving cars requires, like to be able to sell them, you have to fundamentally shift liability from users and operators to, the operator changes from being you to being somebody else. So the liability shifts from you to maybe the manufacturer. And then, of course, if the car gets in a wreck, they're going to say, oh, you didn't keep it clean or maintained or whatever. And so can you even have private ownership of a vehicle? How are you going to work all of that out? And instead of figuring those questions out, people have thought that, well, if we can just keep making them safer, that somehow they'll get adopted. So it's a lot of people working after a tech solution to what's fundamentally a business problem. That doesn't mean that there's not a solution. When I come up with the solution for the business problem, I'm going to quit and make a crap ton of money. But that was the thing. I saw that. I was frustrated because we were building more tech, but the tech wasn't the limitation, and that's still true today. The thing I did not see coming, I'm just really going to second that, like the loneliness epidemic, and to have that be such a problem in our society right now and come from, I do think you have to tie right back to technology. And the really scary thing about that for me is that it is the technology that, like you said, we thought was going to bring us together seems to be the root cause of why we're actually lonelier and feel more disconnected than ever before. And the same thing I think is happening on business productivity side. We're all busy, and we get shit done. Like, you look back, I read all of these books on sending people to the moon, and you look at these complex, like I'm basically a systems engineer, I'm a robotics guy. These complex systems engineering problems, and guys and gals were solving them with like draft paper. And you look at that and think, we have so many productivity tools now. Like imagine if they had Figma and Jira and whatever else. And it's like, yeah, and that's at some point we have to think that's why we're not getting anything done, is because we're spending all our time on email and whatever else. But then also we can't imagine doing it without that, because that's the only way we get anything done. I don't know.
It's crazy. I do want to ask a question that I've been thinking about since watching all of these commercials for self-driving cars. So this is the slight aside, but it is a future question. Are we about to enter a resurgence, golden years of drinking and driving? I'm really, it's something I think about every time I watch one of those commercials. Is it going to be like the 50s all over again?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to get to where where the car can actually drive itself. And again, that's all of this stuff and then you have to be ready to take over is bullshit. Like Could go on about that all day. Like there's a lot of cognitive studies that show that we are actually, like we think that we're bad at paying attention and doing dull, repetitive tasks, and we think we're good at like higher functioning supervision. And it's actually exactly the opposite. Like you can go play a video game. You can do that all day long. We're actually bad at supervision and getting involved when we need to. So that's why these self-driving car approaches that require us to be ready to take the wheel don't work. So yeah, I mean, I think once we get there, then that is the point. By the time we have self-driving cars that we can really think of that way, yeah, you need to be able to drink and drive them because you are not operating at all. And Waymo. So Chris Urmson, who I used to work with back at Carnegie Mellon, he ran Waymo for 7 years, and they talk about this in terms of elevators. You get in the elevator and you have zero control. There's an emergency stop button in there that actually doesn't really do anything, but they put it there because otherwise people freak out if it's not there.
But there's all those magical controls that only firefighters can access.
Exactly. But like that's the deal. That Waymo said we have to be able to take the steering wheel out of the car because of this point. Because if someone imagine I would take the stairs if one of you guys was controlling the elevator. Like if one of you guys was going to drive it down. I don't trust anybody for anything. So it's the only reason we trust those things is because we have no control. Because all we could do is screw it up. And that's the way we have to think about cars. If they're going to work as a self-driving car, we need to not be able to screw it up. And yes, you should be able to drink and drive.
I was going to ask you about the idea of having sort of a remote control center where you had folks remotely piloting vehicles for the drivers. Instead of completely autonomous vehicles, you have them remote piloted like we do with drones sometimes.
Yeah, there's several of those companies. Another one of them just went out of business. It's, again, it's these the question here is like, what's the business problem and what are you actually going to solve for? And how tolerant are you going to be of you're sitting in your own car, stuck somewhere along with everybody else on the street because someone somewhere else has to do something that you used to be able to do yourself. Like you're not going to tolerate that. And that's, again, these messages. And I think, I'd be interested in this kind of why you think that metaverse has come along slower. Because I think in self-driving cars, I think it came along slower because people didn't actually go around and talk to people about why they own a car. They just sort of assumed that they own a car to get places. And I don't think, you don't look like a guy that owns a car to get somewhere. So...
I'm sort of the unique example because I don't drive much, but yeah, when I do drive, it's to drive, not to go somewhere.
So, I mean, that's the question for me. I would assume, I don't know as much about the metaverse, but I would assume that some of the challenges there are that there was maybe a misalignment of what people actually wanted to do.
I drove an old Toyota Land Cruiser for 25 years. I had given up on getting places. It was just about looking cool on the side of the road.
I just bought an Ineos Grenadier, which is objectively a worse driving experience than any car I've ever had, and it is so cool.
Right?
It is so cool.
Yeah, well, Raymond, that's a good question. So is it similar to what's blocked the metaverse?
Well, I think what we all expected was, especially after the pandemic, that we could just join in whatever way we wanted to join the world, gaming or business or meetings, have Zoom meetings in the way we wanted. Headsets, just simple webcam or nothing. And that just didn't pull off. I mean, the headsets were too complicated, it messes up the hair. These things, which is one of the biggest hints.
I think you're the only person up here who might be worried about that.
I've never had that problem.
For three totally different reasons. The rest of us are not.
That's why you question why it didn't take off, right? So, but yeah, no. So those things, the adoption didn't go that fast with all these tools. And I have to say, when I have meetings, I'm often in meetings where there's no webcam used at all. Some have their webcam open. And I also do meetings in the metaverse or in, let's say, workrooms or something like that, which is very cool. But all the parties in the call need to have the same setup. So that is kind of slowing down this whole adoption because nobody has always that setup there at that time as well, because you're on the road as well, or you're whatever. You need to go to another room and then you need to take your headset and etc., etc. So this whole thing, yeah, is developing slowly and with bumps, but it definitely will be there as things get lighter, cheaper, etc. Like I just heard that the Meta Quest 2 is going to reduce to $200, which makes it a lot more accessible for a lot more people as well in developing parts of the world. So that is another big thing, because I think the developing countries really need access to these metaverses. It allows them to be educated, it allows them to be part of the world, do business, and that's where we need to get the people on board. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I want to say, and I want to believe that what's really holding everyone back is the technological interfaces, right, to being in that space. So it's really uncomfortable. It's kind of clunky, almost sort of a novelty factor, right? Even though full immersion is a lot of fun, you sort of get immersion fatigue, or at least I do after a while, right? So going back to the real world is sort of like a real refreshing experience. What I really want to believe is that the metaverse is slow to take off because people still crave that sort of biologically based interaction, right? The reality, the touch, the feel, the dynamics. I mean, I'm in a lot of conference calls with a number of folks, and a lot of them around ideation and invention. And yeah, we can get it done, but there's such a profound difference in the dynamics of interaction when you're sitting around a table, bouncing ideas. It's the body language. It's, I don't even know if it's pheromones or what, but the dynamics in real time, being in the same room, just can't be replicated in the metaverse. And I don't know if that's a technological problem. I hope it's not, right? I hope that we'll always crave that sort of
little BO smell.
Yeah, I mean, that
out
just
of it.
adds to the whole thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's where digital twins come in, right? Like, if I see you and I truly see you in there, then I have a feeling that I'm really with you. If you suddenly have short hair and things like that, then yeah.
You know, in a
Great avatar, that's kind of...
Do you think the pandemic in some ways actually pushed it off farther because we maybe were thrust into it before we were ready?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really good point. We sort of made do with what we had to do at the time, right? And so when that sort of the curve got flattened or whatever, and we were able to take off that gear, I think we were all sort of drawn into that comparison between having to exist in that world when we weren't ready to do it versus the relief of not having to exist in that world. And so I think maybe that sort of reignited our craving for real interaction as opposed to digital interaction.
That's interesting. Yeah, because that's just what, well, Josh and I were on a panel earlier this week just talking about that. Like, that's the, how do you combat in creativity AI, and it is going for human interaction and a kind of more visceral thing. Let me ask you guys, so we talked about getting to this point. So this is the 10th Hackfort. What is the 20th Hackfort going to look back at and say, here's what's changed? I mean, here's some of these. What are one or two from your perspective of the biggest differences that technology will show in that space of time? You want to go first, Raymond?
Sure. Well, I think we are for sure in a hybrid environment where we can join from all over the world, get a much bigger audience as well. And yeah, that is, I think...
Which we could technically do today, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, and actually I had this idea of doing that, but not everybody's ready yet, right? And that's truly the challenge. I mean, I joined a couple of conferences around the world where we had this situation, right? Hybrid and virtual and VR headsets. We had parties online. So I wanted to do that here as well. But yeah, everybody needs to be ready, right? So the DJs need to be ready. They need to be ready to put on a headset and mix in the metaverse, right? And join people from all over the world. And that is not there yet. Now, we implemented some new technologies here at the stage, but not there yet. Now, I met with the DJs and we talked about it, and it's like, yeah, let's do it next year. And it will be small, but it will grow, and we will grow an audience. And I think that will be, in 10 years, it will be just a bigger audience and not only face-to-face.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be just something we'd experience here in Hackfort, but maybe how our lives might be different. Peter?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to answer that question, and I'm just going to take the narrow one. So I think in 20 years, a lot of the conversations will be around space travel, commercialized, commoditized, In fact, Hackfort 20th, 30th anniversary might be the lunar Hackfort, right? I think that's where it's going. I think mankind has an inherent need to explore and an inherent need to discover. And maybe that's because I grew up watching Star Trek, but I really think that really is the next great frontier, right? We can talk all day about iterative advancements in AI and machine learning and robotics and quantum computing and all of these things, right? And to some degree, there's some sort of predictability for those streams going forward. But really, our great achievement will be migrating off of this single planet.
So I'm like the Luddite futurist. So I'm going to go the exact opposite direction from you guys. I'll also say at first, there's a great quote from Bill Gates where he said that we tend to overestimate the change in the next 2 years and underestimate the change in the next 10. And I think that's an important thing. Like when we're talking 10 years out, is to realize it's not going to be accelerations of current trends. Like in 2 years, like, when COVID came, everybody's like, it changes everything. And I was like, no, it's going to accelerate some trends that were already happening. And, nothing completely new is at least going to be visible. Maybe 5-10 years later, we'll look back and be like, oh yeah, that's when that started. But you look 10 years, it's going to be things that are unrecognizable to us. And I think that we tend to see reactions to technology. So, the Green Revolution, which is the most important quiet thing that's ever happened, the fact that, you go back to the 1970s and you listen to what Paul Ehrlich and other people were saying about how we're not going to feed this world, and now we can. And the reaction to that is like that I have chickens in my backyard and a garden, which I wouldn't have had in the 70s when we were worried about feeding the world. But now that we can feed the world in this, very just again, absolutely incredible way, we are all striving to find this like sense of authenticity and localism and, and inefficiency for its own sake. And that's, I see that all over the place, this like surge, the increasing interest more recently in trades, but in trades in a very like hipster, self-aware, semi-ironic way. So I see those sorts of things happening. I think that
I just opened a bookstore for Pete's sake.
Yeah. I mean, look at an event like Treefort, right? I don't think that Treefort could have happened in the 90s at the peak of us listening to music when we had to go to the record store and flip through albums and talk to the people there and buy them. It's the death of that kind of an experience through everything being available at our fingertips and streaming that has made us lean more into getting together in a single place to share a single experience together. So I look at a lot of these things, and I think you can see something similar also in things like the way that people talk about electric vehicles. People are not as in general talking about them in terms of increased performance and a better ownership experience, et cetera. They're talking about it actually in many ways in the sense that like you do have to relearn how to drive, and it is a different experience, and that's something. So I'm looking at the reactions. I'm looking at the reactions to the trends that we have now. I'm looking to us refusing. Like I can't refuse right now to be on a Zoom call. That's just, it's part of my job. And if somebody wants to meet remotely, like I've got to do that or I'm going to get fired. But I can imagine a world where like we're in this point where I'm just like, that's just not something I do. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, you want to talk, I will travel to you, you'll travel to me or something like that. But I'm not going to do this because that's not how I add my value. And this one's a little bit less into technology, but I think it's an example of things we'll see from this type of reactionary approach. We have a different population bomb going on now through many parts of the world where we are going to be having shrinking populations, or we already have shrinking populations. Like, what is the reaction to that going to be? Some people are going to say, hey, good, there's too many people on this planet anyway. We have too big an impact. It'll be better when there's fewer people. We're going to get like weird fertility cults and stuff like this. Like we are going to get, because that's, you already see stirrings of people who talk about, who talk about we need to have kids so that there's somebody to take care of us. et cetera. Like that's going to turn into a thing. And I think you're going to see anti-technology.
It's called the Catholic Church. Oh,
you're going to see, well,
what?
No, but I think the thing is, the Catholic Church historically that might have been the case, right? But it's not anymore. That's not where people flock, for this kind of thinking. So again, just like you see this with things around organic food, et cetera, like I think we're going to see anti-technology backlash, and we're going to see, push against these trends in a way that, like, what does turn up to 10 people deleting Facebook look like? Because you already hear people talk about this. You talk about people saying, I deleted Twitter and I'm happier because of it. I don't do social media anymore. What happens when that's like what's the next step to that? And I think we will see whatever that is in 10 years.
Yeah, and how that penetrates into
See, we're already
business.
forming a cult up here.
Right.
We're done with social media cult here.
Well, both of you, a couple of you have mentioned this, and it really makes me think. So we talk, a lot of technology issues certainly is when we talk about it here in the United States, and it's about, how are we amping up this extra stuff after our Maslow's hierarchy of needs are all taken care of, right? But what is technology? What are some of these changes that are happening now and are going to happen that, you mentioned the food, you mentioned food production, you talked about developing countries. What out there have you seen that's going to make a difference, not in, am I going to have a more interesting leisure life, but in real life, on the ground, massive change for humanity in parts of the world that, we don't necessarily think about when it comes to technology?
I'll go first real quick. I think one area that you could probably point to would be in the world of genetics. I think gene therapy, even further than that, gene construction and manipulation, as terrifying as that may actually sound, to me it does, I think that's inevitably where we're going to head so that we can, at least ostensibly, get control over our own evolution. And that's really terrifying.
I just read about
there'll be a big cultish backlash to
for
that
sure.
as well, right?
I just read this morning about the enhanced games that a group of tech entrepreneurs, anything Peter Thiel's involved in, I just sort of want to just be careful of. And these guys want to say, they're like, why let's let everybody enhance all they want and let them compete at 5 sports and just, if they kill themselves, they kill themselves. It's just like Running Man.
Yeah.
That was in the Times today.
As long as there's a fantasy league and an ability to bet on it. So, yeah. It's relevant.
Yeah, so I think that also after the pandemic, we've seen that a lot of people feel comfortable online. That's where they hide, right? But also now that's an area where they can develop, where they feel comfortable, right? So, and that's something that's growing a lot, and they do less face-to-face social, but that could be concerning. On the other hand, it's also good because there's a life for them now, right? And that's where they hang out and make friends and etc. and work, and it's a completely different world. Some of us are not used to that, but it's there, right? And I agree, it is kind of scary if that truly takes over. But it is happening, and I don't have the answer to that, but I can see that people do that. That they get there and that they develop their own life and world there, and friends. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's, I see these things, videos out of India where people are just solving problems with creativity, and I just think oh my God, you could not get away with that in the United States. Like somebody who takes, some chunk of technology and goes and puts it into a car or something like that and drives down the road with it, and you're again, I would get pulled over before I got out of my neighborhood. But somebody's solving a real problem that they're experiencing with a combination of extremely low technology or infrastructure and extremely high technology thrown together. And I don't see as much of that. We're in many ways in the fully developed world, we're limited. I do, and I certainly don't mean, and I certainly don't represent the opinions and beliefs of my employer. And I certainly don't mean this to be an entirely anti-regulatory claim, but something interesting is happening right now in Europe. There's a lot of back padding going on because they have created regulations around AI. And the thing that the politicians are saying is they're saying that Europe will be the leader in AI because they have created the best regulatory structure. Go talk to an entrepreneur and ask any entrepreneur if they're excited about a regulatory structure. They're not. So it's a way that, I think in the developed world, like we tend to think in terms of control and centralization. And that's counter to really getting a lot of innovation. And again, that's not to say that innovation is an unalloyed good and we should have no regulation, just in order to have it. But I'm very interested in the idea that as the living standards in the developed world improve, and you see getting higher up Maslow's, hierarchy, about that's where innovation is going to happen. And I see that writ small in Boise, and this is one of the reasons that I'm very excited to be in Boise, is that we may not always be on the front lines of developing the new big technologies, but in many ways we're in a better position to think about applications. And it's not Boise in particular. I think many smaller places that are outside of Silicon Valley and San Francisco and New York have this opportunity because, again, we tend to think not just about the tech, but we tend to think about the application of the tech. What problem can we solve? Because I work for a company that solves a problem first. If I lived in Silicon Valley, I might work for a company that's thinking about technology first, and how to take that out. And I think we'll see that on a broader scale with the developing world in many ways being more concerned about applications and problem solving, and us being more concerned in the developed world, with negative externalities to start with, but also just kind of tech for its own sake.
Right. Which is sort of part of the research and development, ecosystem too, right? That you say that on universities, that kind of research for pure research sake, and then this always sort of struggling on when and how to apply it in different ways. So it's not super unexpected, I guess, that there's those different approaches, but it's nice the way you frame that.
Yeah, maybe one response here. I'm originally from Europe, Netherlands. 17 years ago or so I moved here. And regulations. That's one that's big there, right? And I listen to podcasts every day, also from the Netherlands. And I have to say, one out of the two podcasts around tech is always about regulations. And it drives these people crazy there, right? And then you have the different countries as well. That have, Germany, big on that. And then you have Italy, who forbids all kinds of stuff. And they're frustrated there, the developers. So you see them looking elsewhere, right? Other places that they can develop stuff and take it further. That's really something that I observe that I also find very boring to listen to. But I mean, it's like, oh no, not another podcast about regulation. So yeah, annoying.
Interesting conversation about regulations. So I work in a highly regulated industry. And not that the regulatory landscape affects the innovation or ideation process, at least in the space that I'm in, but the development and the operationalization of the technologies that I work on definitely are affected by the regulatory environment. Ironically, one of the problems that I've been asked to help solve is using technology to automate the regulatory compliance process. So beginning with the...
Because then we can have twice as many regulations as we do now.
So we're going to regulate the regulations, right? So we ingest all of this content, whether it's Word or PDF or CSV or whatever, right? All of the text gets ingested and parsed and broken down and then developed into meaningful controls, and then you sort of automate the testing and results. And so, there's a lot of irony built into that, but I thought I would mention that.
See, it's just you asked this to AI, the regulatory AI and the trying to get around the regulatory AI, and you just let them off in some server room, fight it out. Well, and then they come back to us in 300 microseconds. Does anybody have a question from the audience? Anything brewing out here? I'll come back with the mic.
So this is a topic that was not covered. Big tech. and I work for a big tech company that could maybe gobble Idaho anytime they wanted to, if they want to. But my question is, over the last 3 or 4 decades, both on the demand side and on the supply side, you have fewer and fewer tech companies taking control. You have fewer semiconductor companies, fewer design companies, fewer large software companies that have taken control. And then on the supply side, productivity is predominantly towards enterprise solutions. I know we talked about how has our life gotten better. We can talk about Uber, maybe DoorDash, but I think most of the productivity that has happened over the last few decades has been towards the enterprise side, whether it is automation, Google providing all these different services to different companies, Facebook offering services to small businesses, etc. The question is, will there be a resurgence of small indie tech in future? Will we go back to maybe the 70s and the 80s where there were small companies innovating with the new AI trends that are here today?
Good question. Well, I think any tech company that thinks they can gobble up Idaho does not shop at the same gun stores I do. Gun stores. Yeah, this is actually, I don't actually have a great opinion about this, which is rare. I usually have a hot take, but I've been asking this question of a lot of people. Like the way I'm thinking about it, which is all I can say about that is, like, 2 things are in tension here. One is these look at AI as an example. These models are so expensive to produce that only a few places are ever going to be able to produce them. On the other hand, those companies aren't really thinking about applications or how to use them, and the only way they're going to monetize them is by making them available to everybody. So these 2 things are in tension. Like, one is a place where you can clearly see the cost of AI is centralizing power in a few large tech companies. And then the other thing is that tech is now available to all of us in a way, like, I would imagine almost everybody in this room has used ChatGPT. And if you haven't, then I really question why you're here. So, those are two things that are pulling in completely different directions. And and I'm not sure who wins, like whether power shifts out of all of this. And then I also kind of think sometimes that question maybe misses the point, because the reason we don't have small tech companies anymore is largely regulation. Every time I think about starting a company, I'm like, I can't make it worthwhile to have a 5-person company, because too much of my life would be spent doing things that I don't want to do. So I trade that, I outsource that to a company in exchange to, their bullshit instead of the bullshit I'd be dealing with running a company. And that has been, I think, just look at it. More and more of us, we're all company men now. Like, more and more of us make that decision to be part of a large company, and the profit incentives there too, because, like, this used to be an old joke about Microsoft in the old days, that they would just buy people up. They didn't know what they did, but they'd buy them up just to stop the competition. And there's a lot of that goes on right now. Like, the robotics industry where I used to work, a lot of my friends made a lot of money selling to Google, and many of them had big regrets about that, because they lost control of their company, and then Google had other priorities and did not invest in robotics. There's a large swaths of the the robotics space that Google ended up pulling back. And I don't say that to particularly call out Google. I think that's just an example of how sometimes big companies, and I think Google did that in a well-intentioned way, but like it still kind of happened, and all of that is pushing against us having a lot of small, nimble companies.
Yeah, and I want to take a slightly different perspective on that, and maybe not answer the question directly, but
that makes 2 of us.
I think large tech companies have a couple things that small, bespoke companies will never have. One of the things they have is technical gravity. So in a way, they're sort of like tech drug dealers, right? So everybody has Windows running on their machine, or Linux, or one flavor, right? Or iOS or whatever, right? go try and live your life without it, right? So once you've mainlined Microsoft Windows, you're going to be looking for the next fix, man. The other thing that they can do is that they can force technology on us. So how many of us have really hated going to Office 365 and having to sign in every time you open your stupid email, right? Holy crap, and more icons, more buttons, more crap that I never asked for, I didn't want, and I can't go back and use Windows 95 anymore. So, and it pisses me off, you might be able to tell that. I want the ability to pick and choose what technologies work for me. I don't want them thrust upon me or have my productivity or even potential existence threatened by not being able to use them, right? So, yeah, screw you, big tech.
Well, to maybe answer your question. So small tech companies. If you go to a show like CES, where they have these pavilions full of countries, full of small tech companies, the one big goal they all have is being acquired by a big company or get a lot of money, and then they get into this whole like flow of becoming part of these big companies, right? So there's hardly a chance anymore to become really, really big from the start and become a new big tech company, basically. That's kind of what I'm seeing. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
And the ecosystem, I'll come back here in a sec. I mean, I worked at Boise State for 8 years. The ecosystem is so different for rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding and building up a tech. It was hard. It was hard for Boise State with a bunch of smaller, and Hackfort, really. I mean, this sort of transition of a bunch of really small, Micron, HP, like these two giant things. And then, you know, and Micron is a big contributor to Boise State, so is HP, so is a lot of the smaller companies. But there is a difference between the kind of money that a Micron has in terms of being able to reinvest in local education and all these things than a bunch of smaller companies. So I do think there's like, that's even another layer of just the complicated nature of how that can be successul. Yeah,
maybe a quick thing on big companies like HP. I don't hope anybody's offended or in the room from HP.
I mean, I just talked about the Catholic Church, so if there's anyone still here, they're pretty tough.
I used to work at HP as well, back in Europe. But yeah, we had a standing joke there. Every time a smaller company was acquired, they were messing it up, right? It was dissolved, it didn't exist anymore, or maybe one little piece. So it was really a pity always. And yeah, that may be good sometimes for these companies, got a lot of money, but not always for the tech, because the tech died or the competition was eliminated. So yeah, I've seen it a lot, and we had a lot of jokes about that.
Yeah, I think that's, I have some friends who like, oh, I just got acquired and I'm going to be part of Google X. And a year later, they're like, I'm going to go find something to do. Just been standing here in the corner. Everyone's been ignoring me. Here, go ahead.
So kind of jumping off of the smaller tech versus bigger tech, with the kind of tightening capital market, considering we've seen layoffs partly due to, I'm guessing, just limited amount of capital being put into these companies, and correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't the kind of tightening of capital make it possible for more small tech to kind of continue existing without just immediately being gobbled up by the big players in the market?
So I think that's a great point. I was entering the workforce when the Great Recession happened, and I lost my job during that time. And I was really bummed that I had to go work for a big company right at a time where there was a lot of opportunity and exciting things, but I had to pay the bills. And that became, for most of my career, like my major financial goal has explicitly been, the next time the Great Recession happens, I want to be in a financial position that I can go start a business. Because it's the worst time. A recession's the worst time to work for a big company, and it's the best time to work for yourself. And for at least a decade after 2007, 2008, every time we'd have a thing like this, or something at Trailhead or whatever, like the stories of people who were running small businesses would all be, so in 2008, when I couldn't get a job and had to figure something out, I thought I'd start doing something, and I started trying to solve this problem. And I mean, so much of the innovation and the these tech companies, even some now that are quite big, like started in the Great Recession because of that. And I do think that some of the stagnation we've seen I attribute to the fact that we haven't had a major recession since that time. Mentioning Micron and HP, like a lot of the companies in Boise got started because of people who got laid off from HP and Micron. There is huge opportunity created. I guess one more example I'll throw in there is like at Count, go back a few years ago, it was very difficult for us because we had a bunch of VC-backed competitors and we were private equity backed. And, private equity, the model is they put the money into you that they're going to put into you, and then you can't ask for any more money. They don't want to dilute ownership, but also they don't ask for anything back from you. It's just grow. We got to reinvest everything that we earned. But our competitors were fine losing money because they were in that VC model. They needed to grow, and they were fine with a 150% loss on whatever they spend. So we found our competition just constantly undercutting us on price and losing money on their deals. But that would get them more data, or it would get them some brands for their thing or something like that. When they finally all started going out of business, you're kind of like, or having to sell. Because that money slowed down, and this is now looking back, a couple of years ago. You don't feel good about people losing their job, but at the same time, there was some of like, okay, finally, reality is going to set back in, and we're going to actually charge what these things really cost. So it's hard to compete in a space where there's just money flowing around. So I think like there's a lot of creative destruction in this, and I think it's a great point that in times of easy capital, it's actually very hard to start a business and get a business to success and long-term growth, which is ironic because everybody and their brother seems to be starting a business and getting a huge capital injection. But where does that money go? It goes chasing the same employees and, chasing the same deals and whatever. And I think true innovation seems to come from difficult times. But I also think, and this is the deal for younger folks out there, you guys think the capital's gotten tight now and it's still historically loose. So we're not in that same kind of a space right now, even though, again, people are losing their jobs. It's really nothing compared to even, relatively mild recessions in the past. But I think that, and I'm not hoping for one, but I will say that if one happens, I think just like we did after 2000 and just like we did after 2007, you'll see assets getting picked up on the cheap, being redeployed in ways that generate strong ROI, and people build companies that have long-term futures, without as like a narco-capitalist kind of guy. I don't want to say without competition, but without people undercutting that, without people cutting below a true competitive floor that can return investment.
Anyone?
I want to know if you guys see value in the Web 3.0 or what your thoughts are on that.
Well, you should have come to the session before. Yes, I mean, there's obviously because of the recent election fraud and big companies selling off information, there's a big demand for it. I mean, it's not fully implemented yet, but yeah, I mean, this is a super growth area where a lot of financial companies are also after and seeing what they can do with it. So yeah, totally.
Yeah, just creating more dependency, right? It's just the allure of yet another enhanced environment, more capability, creating more reliance and more risk. So yeah, there.
No. I think Web 2.0 came around. That was a total bummer. So then they came up with Web 3.0 because you got to sell something.
It's a full degree webbier.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see this. I got out of the robotics field because we went around trying to sell people robots. We didn't go around trying to solve people's problems, selling them what they wanted to buy. We went around selling robots. When I lost my job working for a small robotics company, when the mining industry, when copper went from $12 a ton or $12 a pound to $4 a pound, and and the whole industry kind of went away. I was working on a research program for automating these haul trucks that can carry 110 tons of ore at a time that are the size of my house. And we were being run next to another company in the research group for our customer that was like making better paint. And these both solve a problem for a mine, which is whenever there's an accident, which is what we were trying to prevent, they have to shut the mine down and they lose like $15 million a day because the mine shut down. Whenever they have to pull a truck off the use so that they can spend 2 weeks painting it, they lose a bunch of money. So they didn't care whether they were buying robots or they were buying coatings. They cared about ROI in their space. And nobody in the robotics space was thinking that way, and that's why so many of them are out of business, and the ones that aren't is because they found an application. And again, this is why I think we have an advantage being in a market like Boise, where we are not generally thinking about tech first, we are thinking about applications first and solving people's problems. And I think that's why I am so negative on something like blockchain, where I never heard somebody with a problem say how blockchain was going to help them with that problem. I heard people with blockchain talk about how they could solve a problem that they really didn't know shit about. And, I hear we're doing the same thing right now with AI. We're saying we're going to go automate away all of these jobs that we don't actually know how to do. But we think we can automate them away because we have some superficial understanding. So I think the problem with Web 3.0 is it's a tech-forward approach, and I'm not convinced enough people are asking about what problems they're solving. And I know that if those problems turned out to be solvable by something different than the Web 3.0 technologies, people would not stick with the problem, they would stick with the tech. That's what I saw in robotics. People would go find another problem instead of go find another tech. And I don't buy anything from people, just in my own life, who are not trying to solve the problem that I'm looking for. Like I'm looking for a solution to my problem. I don't care about the tech.
Awesome. Well, guys, I think we're getting the wrap it up signal. I'm really sorry. Finally, before we give them a round of applause, what's one thing everybody should Google that they might not know about what's coming? Just like a word, a technology. What should we know about that we don't know about?
Web free.
Web free. I love it.
CRISPR.
Oh, nice. I don't think we've had any CRISPR talks at Hackfort over these years. That'd be fun.
Ammunition.
So Idaho. Thank you, guys. Help me give them a round of applause. Super. I never even got to my "Are we doomed?" question, which is my favorite one, but you can ask them individually.
Whatever you might need it for.